My name's Rachel, and if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you my life was finally coming together. I had a stable job at one of the biggest marketing firms in Chicago, a boss who pretended to mentor me, and a paycheck that, while not amazing, at least kept my rent and bills paid. I thought I was on track, climbing slowly but surely toward the career I'd worked so hard for. But life has a funny way of ripping the rug out from under you, especially when someone you trust decides you're expendable. The day it happened still plays in my head like a movie I can't shut off. I had just finished presenting a campaign pitch to a room full of clients. My slides, my research, my strategy. The clients were impressed, nodding along, even cracking smiles. For me, it felt like a win. For my boss, Stephanie, it was her moment to shine at my expense. When the meeting ended, Stephanie clapped her manicured hands together like she'd just coached me through the whole thing. "Fantastic work, everyone," she said, flashing her fake smile. I knew Rachel could deliver our vision. Our vision? My blood boiled, but I stayed silent. That's what you learn in corporate America. Keep your head down, play the game, and maybe someday you'll be allowed at the table. That afternoon, she called me into her office. Glass walls, leather chair, the kind of place designed to intimidate you. She leaned back, crossed her legs, and looked at me like she was doing me a favor by even acknowledging me. "Rachel," she started, "I'm letting you go, just like that." No warning, no explanation, no appreciation for the years I'd put in. I just blinked, not sure I'd heard her right. "Wait, what? Letting me go? For what reason?" Stephanie sighed dramatically, like I was the one wasting her time. "You're talented, sure. But the truth is, you don't quite fit the leadership culture we're trying to build. I need people who elevate the team, not just themselves." The irony hit me so hard I almost laughed. She was firing me for her own insecurity, for the fact that clients liked my work better than her empty charm. She wanted to look smart, so she cut me down. I packed my things in silence, walking past the same coworkers who just hours before had congratulated me on the presentation. No one met my eyes. That's another thing you learn in corporate life. People disappear when you're no longer useful. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment staring at the city lights, replaying every word. Fired, leadership culture, not a fit. The words gnawed at me, but what cut deeper was the betrayal. Stephanie wasn't just a boss, she was someone I trusted. Someone I'd covered for when she showed up late. Someone I defended when others whispered about her climbing the ladder too fast. And then came the twist I didn't see coming. 2 weeks later, while drowning in job applications, I got a message from an old colleague. Just 3 words: "Check the news." I pulled up the article, and there it was. A headline splashed across every business site: "CEO of Hawthorne Industries under federal investigation." The CEO was none other than Daniel Hawthorne, Stephanie's husband. The same Stephanie who had sat across from me with her smug smile, firing me like I was nothing. My jaw dropped as I read: "Allegations of fraud, insider trading, shady offshore accounts." It was the kind of corporate scandal that destroys legacies. And right there in the middle of it was Stephanie's husband, facing charges that could put him behind bars for decades. I should have just shrugged, maybe even smirked at the karma of it all. But then the article mentioned something that made my pulse race. They were looking for employees and associates willing to testify, people who had evidence, connections, or insights into how the company operated. That's when it hit me. Stephanie hadn't just fired me to look smart. She had shoved me aside to protect herself from what she knew was coming. She thought she could silence me by cutting me loose. But all she'd done was set me free to take everything she cared about and burn it down in front of her daughter. As I sat there, staring at the glowing screen, a slow smile spread across my face. If they wanted witnesses, I was going to be the star. The first time I stepped into the federal building, I felt like I was walking onto the set of a crime drama. Marble floors, metal detectors, agents in dark suits who looked like they hadn't cracked a smile since the 90s. I clutched the strap of my purse a little tighter, reminding myself this wasn't a dream. It was real. I wasn't just Rachel, the woman who got fired because her boss wanted to look good. I was about to be Rachel, the woman testifying against one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. When the elevator doors opened, an investigator met me in the hallway. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, the kind of man who looked like he'd heard every excuse in the book. "Rachel Morgan?" he asked. "That's me," I said, trying to sound steadier than I felt. He introduced himself as Agent Clark, and together we walked into a windowless conference room. A pitcher of water sat on the table untouched. He motioned for me to sit, so, he said, flipping open a folder. "You worked directly under Stephanie Hawthorne at Lennox Marketing for how many years?" 3, I replied. My voice echoed slightly in the sterile room. "And during that time, did you have any exposure to her husband's business dealings?" I hesitated. That was the thing. On paper, my world and Daniel Hawthorne's empire didn't overlap. But behind the scenes, Stephanie was always whispering, always dropping names. Daniel's strategy, Daniel's contacts, Daniel's advice. It was as if her entire identity depended on attaching herself to his shadow, not directly. I admitted. But Stephanie blurred the lines constantly. She would brag about insider information. She once told me about a deal Daniel was negotiating before it hit the news. She made me design pitches tailored for companies Daniel's firm was courting. It felt off. Agent Clark leaned forward. Do you have proof of that? That's when I pulled out the folder I'd brought, emails, notes, even a calendar invite where Stephanie had accidentally included me in a meeting description that mentioned Daniel's confidential dealings. She thought I was too insignificant to notice. She was wrong. Clark flipped through the pages, and for the first time, his stone face softened into something almost like satisfaction. This, he said, is exactly what we've been looking for. As I sat there, a strange mix of nerves and excitement buzzed through me. For weeks, I'd felt powerless, like Stephanie had ripped away not just my job but my dignity. But now, I was holding the knife. The days that followed blurred into a whirlwind. Meetings with lawyers, subpoenas for documents, hushed conversations in government offices. Every time I walked into one of those rooms, I reminded myself why I was doing it, not just to get back at Stephanie, but to finally expose the arrogance of people who thought they could play with lives and never face consequences. One night, I was back in my apartment when I got a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Rachel? A familiar voice snapped. It was Stephanie. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to stay calm. What do you want? I asked. Her voice dripped venom. You think you're clever, don't you? Running to the feds, pretending you're some kind of hero. You're pathetic. I almost laughed. Funny. I don't remember pathetic people getting phone calls from desperate bosses trying to save their skin. Her silence on the line was better than any applause. Finally, she hissed, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Daniel has connections. Real power. If you go through with this, you'll regret it. For a moment, fear pricked at me. She wasn't wrong. People like the Hawthorns had lawyers, lobbyists, friends in high places. But then I remembered that night in her office. The smug look on her face as she told me I didn't belong. Stephanie, I said, my voice steady. The only one who's going to regret anything is you. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but a smile tugged at my lips. Because that was the moment I realized she was scared. And that meant I was winning. The first day I walked into the courtroom, I swear the air felt different, thicker, heavier, like the walls themselves were holding secrets. People whispered in hushed voices, cameras flashed outside the doors, and reporters jostled for a glimpse of the man at the center of it all, Daniel Hawthorne. He looked exactly like the kind of CEO you'd expect. Tailored suit, polished shoes, that smug confidence of a man who thought the world bent for him. But I noticed something else too. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked rattled. Maybe because this time he wasn't standing in a boardroom where money could silence the truth. He was standing in front of a judge who didn't care about his billions. I sat on the witness bench, waiting for my turn, my palms damp against the wood. My lawyer leaned over and whispered, remember, Rachel, just tell your story. The truth is enough. When they called my name, my legs felt like they weighed 100 pounds. I walked up, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Then I sat, facing a sea of strangers, and directly across from me, Stephanie. She looked different. The power suit was still there, the perfect hair and makeup too. But her eyes betrayed her. For the first time since I'd known her, she didn't look superior. She looked cornered. Ms. Morgan, the prosecutor began. Can you explain to the court how you came to be employed by Stephanie Hawthorne? And the circumstances surrounding your termination? I swallowed hard but spoke clearly. I worked for Stephanie for 3 years at Lennox Marketing. I gave that company everything, late nights, weekends, all of it. I was loyal. But after a major pitch that I created and delivered, Stephanie fired me. No warning. No valid reason, just gone. The prosecutor nodded. And in your time working under Ms. Hawthorne, did you ever hear her reference confidential information regarding her husband's business? That was my moment. I reached into the evidence folder and handed over the stack of emails and notes. The prosecutor held one up. This email, he said, turning to the jury, shows Stephanie instructing Ms. Morgan to craft a pitch for a company that, at the time, was in private negotiations with Mr. Hawthorne's firm, Ms. Morgan. How did you feel when you received instructions like these? I let out a breath. It felt wrong. I wasn't working for Daniel Hawthorne. I was supposed to be in marketing. But Stephanie constantly blurred the lines. She used her position at Lennox to funnel information, and anyone who questioned it was either silenced or pushed out, including me. As the words left my mouth, I glanced at Stephanie. Her jaw was tight, her hands clenched on the table. She looked like she wanted to leap across the room and strangle me. Then it was the defense attorney's turn. He was slick, charming, the kind of man who thought a smile could unravel anyone. He leaned on the podium and looked me over like I was some naive little girl. "Ms. Morgan," he said, "isn't it true that you were fired for poor leadership skills? That you simply weren't a good fit?" I almost laughed. If by poor leadership skills you mean outperforming my boss in front of clients, then sure. I wasn't a fit for her ego. The jury chuckled softly. Even the judge's lips twitched. The defense attorney's smirk faltered. He tried again. "But you have no direct evidence that Daniel Hawthorne himself instructed you to do anything illegal, correct?" I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "I don't need to." His wife was his mouthpiece, and I was her hands. Every shady request, every leaked detail, every blurred line, it all points back to them. "And I have the receipts." The prosecutor stepped back in, satisfied, and I was dismissed. As I walked past Stephanie's table, I didn't look away. For once, she wasn't the one with the power. I was. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed, shoving microphones in my face. "Rachel, what's it like to testify against your former boss's husband? Do you feel safe? Do you think justice will be served?" I didn't stop walking, but I did pause just long enough to say one sentence that would hit the headlines by nightfall. They thought firing me would shut me up. Instead, it gave me the freedom to finally speak, and just like that, the story exploded. Asterisk, by the time the trial hit its third week, the cracks in Daniel and Stephanie's perfect image were showing. Headlines splashed across every news outlet: "Power couple on trial. Insider trading scandal deepens, wife caught in middle of husband's empire." Their glossy magazine cover lives were unraveling under fluorescent courtroom lights. And I was right in the middle of it. I'd thought testifying would be the hardest part. But what came after was worse: the waiting. Every day I walked past reporters, whispers, flashing cameras. Every night, my phone buzzed with unknown numbers, voicemails with muffled threats. Emails from people telling me to watch my back. Some were obvious attempts at intimidation. But others felt closer. One night, as I was walking home, I noticed a black SUV idling at the corner near my building. No plates I recognized, windows tinted to dark. I stood there for a second, pretending to scroll my phone, but my heart was racing. The SUV didn't move. I hurried inside, locked my door, and spent the rest of the night staring at my blinds, waiting for shadows. The next morning, Agent Clark called me in. "Rachel," he said firmly, "we've had reason to believe the Hawthornes are trying to spook witnesses. You're not alone in this. We'll assign protection if it escalates." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Me, the girl who used to spend nights designing ad campaigns, now needed government protection because my ex-boss and her CEO husband wanted me silenced. But instead of fear, a new feeling settled in: defiance. They wanted me scared. They wanted me quiet. And I refused to give them that satisfaction. A few days later, I sat in court again. This time as a spectator. The prosecution called in financial analysts, employees, even former board members. One by one, they painted a picture of Daniel's empire built on lies, manipulation, and fraud. And sitting beside him, always immaculate, always pretending she was untouchable, was Stephanie. But the mask was slipping. She shifted in her seat constantly, whispered furiously to Daniel's lawyers, shot daggers at anyone who dared mention her name. She looked less like a power executive and more like a trapped animal. At one point, during a recess, she caught my eye across the hallway. For a split second, it was just us: no lawyers, no cameras, no jury. She walked right up, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. "You don't know what you've started," she hissed, her perfect smile plastered on for the reporters nearby. "You think you're winning? When this is over, no one will even remember your name." I leaned in, close enough that only she could hear me. "Maybe not, but they'll remember yours for all the wrong reasons." Her smile faltered, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. The next witness took the stand, a financial manager who admitted to falsifying reports. Under Daniel's orders, the courtroom erupted. Stephanie buried her face in her hands while Daniel clenched his jaw so hard I thought his teeth would crack. By the end of that day, it was clear the Hawthornes weren't just fighting for their reputation anymore. They were fighting for their freedom. And as I walked out of that courthouse, reporters swarming again, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I wasn't just part of their downfall. I was the spark that lit the fire. They had fired me to look smart. Now the whole world was watching them crash and burn. Asterisk, the courtroom had changed. At first, it had felt like Daniel and Stephanie still owned the room. They walked in with their army of lawyers, their designer clothes, their smug confidence. But by the fifth week, the energy was different. The jury avoided their eyes. Reporters didn't clamor for their attention anymore. They wanted statements from the prosecution. Even the judge seemed less patient with the endless objections from Daniel's side. And Stephanie? She was unraveling. Every day she looked a little less polished. Her makeup couldn't hide the sleepless nights, her hands trembled when she shuffled through notes. And she snapped at her lawyers more than once. Daniel, of course, kept his poker face, but I could tell beneath that smooth exterior. He was panicking too. The turning point came when the prosecution introduced a set of recordings. The courtroom went silent as the audio played, Daniel's voice, calm and commanding, instructing subordinates to manipulate reports. And then, clear as day, Stephanie's voice chiming in, smoothing over logistics, making suggestions on how to cover their tracks. The room exploded with murmurs. The jury leaned forward. Reporters scribbled furiously. Stephanie's face drained of color. Her lawyer leapt up, objecting, demanding the evidence be dismissed. But the judge overruled him. The recordings were in. When court adjourned for the day, Stephanie stormed out, cameras flashing all around her. For the first time, she didn't put on that fake, confident smile. She looked cornered. I didn't plan it, but we ended up in the same hallway again. She turned, her eyes burning with something between fury and desperation. You think you've won? She spat, her voice low but sharp. Do you have any idea what this will do? To me, to him, to everything we built? I stared back at her, unflinching. What you built wasn't real, Stephanie. It was lies. And lies fall apart. She shook her head like I didn't get it. You don't understand, Daniel. He doesn't lose, ever. If he goes down, he'll drag everyone with him. Including me. Including you. And for the first time, I heard something new in her voice, fear, yes. But also regret. Like maybe, just maybe, she hadn't signed up for the monster her husband truly was that night. News outlets replayed the recordings over and over. The Hawthorns caught on tape was the headline everywhere. Social media was brutal. Their faces were memes, their voices parodied, their empire mocked in real time. But me? I wasn't hiding anymore. My name, my story, it was out there. People messaged me, strangers thanking me for speaking up, for standing tall against people who thought money made them untouchable for years. Stephanie had been the one standing over me, firing me, dismissing me, making me feel small, and now, she was the one shrinking. The trial wasn't over yet. The verdict hadn't been read, but it didn't matter. The world already knew the truth, and no amount of money, power, or intimidation could change that. I went to bed that night with a strange, quiet thought looping in my mind. They stole my job to protect their image, but my testimony destroyed it. And tomorrow, the final chapter of this fight would begin. The day of the verdict, the courthouse was packed. Reporters lined the steps like vultures, microphones shoved into every corner, cameras flashing so fast it felt like lightning storms. Inside, the air was suffocating. You could feel the weight of it, weeks of testimony, evidence, scandals all boiling down to this moment. I sat in the gallery, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles turned white. Across from me, Daniel sat stone-faced, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the jury box. Stephanie sat beside him, but she wasn't the woman I once worked for. She wasn't the polished executive who strutted through Lennox marketing like she owned the air we breathed. No, this woman was pale, exhausted, her hair slightly out of place, her shoulders sagging under the reality that her carefully curated life was crumbling. All rise. The bailiff called. The jury filed in. My heart hammered. The foreperson stood, holding the slip of paper that would decide everything. The silence was deafening as the judge asked the question, on the charge of conspiracy to commit securities fraud, how does the jury find the defendants? The foreperson's voice rang out clear and firm, guilty. A wave rippled through the room. Gasps, whispers, the scratching of pens against paper. On the charge of insider trading? Guilty. My breath caught. And on the charge of obstruction of justice? Guilty. Daniel's face barely moved, but the vein in his temple throbbed. Stephanie flinched with every word, as though the verdicts were physical blows. The judge's gavel struck. The defendants will be remanded into custody until sentencing. Chaos erupted. Reporters darted out to file their stories, cameras zoomed in, people shouted. Marshals moved in, cuffing Daniel first. He stood, still trying to look composed, but I saw the twitch in his jaw, the fury in his eyes. He glanced back, maybe searching for Stephanie's gaze, but she wasn't looking at him. She was staring at me. For just a moment, everything around us blurred. It was just the two of us, like that first day she fired me. Only this time, the roles were reversed. She opened her mouth, maybe to spit venom, maybe to beg. I'll never know. Because before she could, a marshal pulled her hands behind her back, snapped the cuffs into place, and led her away. The mighty Stephanie Hawthorne, dragged out of a courtroom in handcuffs. I should have felt triumphant. But what I felt was something deeper, relief, closure. The knot that had sat in my chest since the day she blindsided me with that pink slip finally loosened. Outside the courthouse, the crowd swarmed. Reporters shouted questions at me. Rachel, how does it feel? Do you have anything to say to Stephanie Hawthorne? I paused, looking straight into the cameras. My voice was steady, calm. She fired me to look smart, I said. But in the end, all she did was reveal who she really was. And the world finally saw it. The clip went viral. It was on every evening news broadcast, every social media feed. People I didn't even know reached out, calling me brave, calling me an inspiration. My story wasn't just mine anymore, it belonged to everyone who had ever been silenced, dismissed, or underestimated. Weeks later, at sentencing, Daniel was given 12 years in federal prison. Stephanie got 6. Not a slap on the wrist. Not a fine they could laugh off. Real time, real consequences. And me? I walked out of that courthouse free. Not just free from them, but free from the weight they'd put on me for so long. I thought being fired had ruined my life. But standing there, watching them lose everything, I realized something: they hadn't ruined me. They'd set me free. And in the end, their empire didn't collapse because of me, it collapsed because of their own greed, their own arrogance, their own lies. All I did was tell the truth. And the truth was enough to burn their world to the ground.